Winning is not an antidote to hope. It can be a fuel for hope, but it requires intentionality and actually the readiness to organize a constituency that can hold you accountable. And too few politicians want that. I was introduced to organizing in Mississippi in 1964 as part of the Mississippi Summer Project to challenge the segregated Democrats. So I'm a white Jewish guy from Harvard. That's not being an insider. The word education comes from the Latin educere, which means to draw out, not to put in. In other words, it's developmental. It's sort of the potential a person has, trying to cultivate that, trying to support that growth, rather than trying to get in their heads. And that's what I learned how to do there. It was learning how to work with people to help them find their courage, because you didn't have to argue about grievances, they were real. The question of challenging those, that was what the movement was about. It was about enabling people to find courage. Where do they find courage? Well, first you start with a person's own story, own life. I mean, there are often sources of courage or hope within their life that they may not fully appreciate that you can reference to. It may be that they're in a community where they can join with others and together find courage they can't find singularly. So enabling people to discover that they could actually do something about it. It may start very small, signing a pledge card, very small, talking to your neighbor, very small. The point is you begin creating a set of experiences that affirm a person's efficacy and capacity. In 1968, I was working with the farm workers movement in California, and we were supporting Bobby Kennedy for president. And we had brought a whole contingent of farm workers to East Los Angeles, mostly non-citizens, but their work was to turn out the vote of Latino citizens. My first experience there was doing Get Out the Vote, and Fred Ross taught me. He says, here's what you do. You go door to door until you find somebody who's energized and who could take responsibility for completing the precinct, for going to the others. You then give them a little prep, and you give them the list, and then you go to the next precinct. In other words, you weren't going out there just to deliver a message. You were going out there to look for potential leadership. And once you found it, then you equipped it to pick up where you left off so you can go on and build the next one. And that's how you build something that can get to scale. It sounds so simple and so basic, but boy, that lesson stuck with me forever. You don't make change without sacrifice, and often it's the people who have the least that have to sacrifice the most. That was my experience in the South. It was my experience in the farm worker movement. In other words, it's by generating your own resources, seeing the power in your own resources. I always use the example of the Montgomery bus boycott, started the modern civil rights movement, boycotted buses for a year, and they won. What resource do these poor working people bus riders have? They didn't have a lot of money. Turns out they all had feet. And if they used their feet to walk to work and deny the bus company the bus fare, instead of using their feet to get on the bus and give the bus company the bus fare, they could transform individual dependency into collective power. And to me, that's what we've been losing, has been this dependency on donors and on gifts rather than developing the capacity within our own communities. Our approach to organizing is based on 5 practices. We start with relationship building real relationships, not transactions. These days, everything is transactional. A relationship requires commitment to another person, to a cause, because that's what gives it a future. It can grow and it can develop. Transactions don't go anywhere. The second is storytelling. Storytelling is about how to access the emotional resources embedded in our values that are communicated through stories, through narratives of how you deal with disruptions, how you can encounter disruption with hope rather than fear. The third is strategizing, how to turn what you have into what you need to get what you want. The fourth is action, actually making a difference on the ground that you can count, how many people turned out, how many people voted. And finally, structuring, creating organizational structure that allows you, enables you to make decisions, to hold yourself accountable, and then get into the work of really building the power you need in order to make the change you want. You can't predict the future. Nobody can. Everything is always a risk of some kind. And so risking the commitment to act in the face of an uncertain future requires courage, but it also requires hope. It is always probable Goliath will win, but sometimes David does.